Welcome to Lifing Coast to Coast, the podcast where we explore trending topics in personal development, wellness, and the art of lifing in today's ever-changing world. I'm moderator Miki here, along with the co-hostesses with the mostesses, Dr. Lovey and Heidi. Let's get into it. Welcome back, Dr. Lovey.
Yeah, welcome to Lifing Coast to Coast. I am Lisa Marie, Dr. Lovey. I'm here with Heidi and Miki, and today I am kind of going off the cuff and diving into a topic I find fascinating, and that is how the mind and the body are constantly talking to each other. I was thinking that I wrote this down. The body that minds you and keeps the receipts.
Love it.
Those receipts.
And it's not, it is all in your head, but it's not. That's what I wrote down. That's the extent of my notes for today.
Perfect.
So yeah, a lot of times we think of the mind and the body as being separate, right? The mind is the logical part of you, and our body is whatever, I don't know, that follows through the commands. And there is a mind-body connection, and our body does keep the receipts, right, for everything that we've experienced. And there is a communication that goes on between our body and our mind, right? Our microbiome and our gut actually produces more serotonin than our brain even, right?
My gut is smarter than my brain, isn't it?
So there's a lot that's going on. And we also have this threat response, right? Our vagus nerve, it's the nerve that wanders through our whole body, and it touches every single organ. And all of these things are so important. So that's where I am today. We've talked before about the autonomic nervous system and how our body responds to threats, and how our vagus nerve, will slow things down or it'll speed things up. And it's designed to do that. And also thinking about how our body reacts to emotional stress. We've talked a little bit about that, and how our gut, for example, I've worked with people before who have, irritable bowel syndrome or have some kind of issue with their digestive system. And we find that they're dealing with chronic stress, looking at what happened before, what happened after. We're learning that your thoughts can lead to you feeling a certain emotion, which leads to a certain behavior. And then that behavior leads to a certain emotion that leads to your body reacting a certain way. My mom, she's passed. She had liver cancer, not from alcoholism or anything like that. She did have hepatitis C at one point from a blood transfusion from early on. And people who have that are at higher risk for liver cancer. And one thing that I know is that it's not that she caused it herself, right? I mean, we see that there's a connection between the hepatitis C from the blood transfusion. However, if she had stress in her life, it could cause the cells to grow faster, the tumor to grow more because of the inflammation. I had a patient one time. So this is interesting. I worked in primary care setting, and I think that too many providers attribute patient noncompliance to their diseases or conditions, which really bothers me, but that's another topic. So I had this patient. What were you going to say?
You tell me more what you mean about that.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of times when a physician or provider does everything that they can for a patient, and then the patient is still not responding, a lot of times their default is, it must be patient noncompliance. They must not be taking their medication like they should be, or they must not be eating the right diet that they should be, or they must not be exercising the way that they should be. And that's not always the case. It can be sometimes, but I think that it is overly attributed to why the treatments aren't working for patients. And a lot of times you'll hear providers say, oh, patient noncompliance. And so in this situation, that's exactly what happened was I had an elderly, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her background just to give you some context. She was an elderly Hispanic woman who had diabetes mellitus type 2, so just type 2 diabetes, which is autoimmune. And her blood sugars out of control for a period of time of maybe 3 or 4 months. And she came in with her daughter. She told the provider, I don't know what's going on. I've been doing everything I'm supposed to do, and my blood sugars are high. And the provider didn't want to deal with her. And that's what they usually do is they call the doctor of behavioral health to do what we call a hallway handoff or
Wow.
right, or internal referral. So they call me in. She's like, first of all, why, what are you trying to say? This is all in my head. Like, what, are you trying to say I did something wrong? That kind of thing. She happened to have her daughter there with her, who was a nurse. And she also brought in her journal with her. She was keeping track of her blood sugars. She also kept a food journal. She kept an exercise journal. She had her A1Cs, which is a blood test that tells you more long-term how long your blood sugar has been elevated. And I found when I looked at her A1Cs that they had been elevated since December. And I asked her,
what happened in December?
what happened in December? Why wouldn't anybody ask that? Why wouldn't I don't know why a physician, but
Gaslighting of women, don't get me started anyway.
right. I think that a lot of it is they are required to see people within 10 minutes, and they're required to see a certain amount of patients within a day. And it's ridiculous, really, and a lot of them are burnt out too. I got to tell you, when they did the hallway handoff, you know what she told me, which is even the provider was Hispanic. So it's interesting how we can have biases, right? As physicians, we can have biases. You think that they go down a checklist, but they look at how you're presenting. They look at your ethnicity. They look at your weight.
Definitely.
Their fat bias is one of the worst biases from medical providers. She tells me, I don't know what's wrong with her. Maybe she's eating too many tortillas or drinking Tampico, which is a sugar orange drink. And
Love
I'm
Tampico.
like, well, that's really rude. Why would she even say something like that? She's stressed. She's not trying to be rude. She's stressed out as a provider. So this, it all goes together. So I asked her what happened in December, and she's, oh, my special needs grandson. He's in his 30s. He moved in with me. And also my companion, my dog, 15 years, died in December. And I was like, oh man, she's stressed out. No wonder her blood sugars are increased because her cortisol levels have increased. And when that happens, your blood sugars. And so no matter, even if she's eating right, she's doing all the things she's supposed to be doing, she's taking her medication, it doesn't mean that she's non-compliant, right? So then I go and I tell the provider she's stressed out. And the provider tells me, oh, well, we'll just prescribe some Ativan, which is lorazepam, which is an anxiolytic. And I'm like, no, we don't need to. First of all, she's elderly. We don't know if that's going to cause her to have delirium. And second of all, maybe let me work with her and let me see if there's some things that we can do first. And I acted as a case manager in some ways and found her some resources for her grandson and then helped her with I didn't call it 4-7-8 breathing at the time, but it's basically the same thing where you're inhaling in deep into your belly and then you're exhaling twice as long as you're inhaling. And we got to do some really quick biofeedback because her blood pressure was also elevated. So we did the breathing and we did a little bit of grounding and guided meditation. And then I had taken her blood pressure before. Well, actually, I didn't take the blood pressure before. I took it after. Somebody else had taken it before, and it was in her record, right? And after the breathing, we took her blood pressure and it went down. So she was able to see in real time that the breathing helped bring down her blood pressure, which motivated her to do it daily. And it encouraged her to do some walking meditations and mindfulness. And within 3 months, she came back and her blood sugars were normal. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So I love this so much because this mind-body connection. This is something I've known my whole life, that we physically manifest the emotions and stresses in areas of our body, and everybody is different. And when we did another topic on anxiety, I brought up how I was feeling, but I forgot to bring up how stress and anxiety can manifest in muscle tension, tight shoulders, jaw clenching, right? Rapid heartbeat. That's the one we're all used to. Oh my God, I can't breathe, and my heart's beating out of my chest and whatever. But it can also engender stomach issues for people, dizziness or lightheadedness, which it does for me, sweating or chills, which it can do for me at night in particular, fatigue, headaches, sleep disturbances, all of those things. So what you're saying, I'm thinking, is so validating in a medical setting for people like this woman. You were getting to the heart of what was going on in her life,
Yes.
not singling out the obvious, which clinical, which is the sugar and the tortillas, those things. You're like, no, what's beyond, what maybe. I love this, Dr. Lovey. This is going to free so many people.
What's the issue behind the issue? Because I've always said too, I have nervous stomach, and I'm a performer, and anytime I'm doing anything like performance wise, job interview, first day, whatever it is, I get nerves, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when was the last time I went to the bathroom. It's going to happen. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that gut.
And Heidi mentioned the whole clenching, right?
Yeah.
You both have talked about having these gut feelings before, noticing your shoulders tighten up when you're stressed, clenching. We don't even notice. If I did a body scan right now, because I'm in this conversation with you all, I didn't even realize that I have tension in my ankles and my knees, that I'm holding tight there. And that's where I experience most of my nerve pain that I have. So no wonder when I'm stressed, that's where a lot of the inflammation goes, is there, because I'm holding it tight. And we do that. We don't even realize it. So even just doing a simple body scan and recognizing where you're tight and maybe tightening it up, loosening it, tightening it up, loosening it. When I watch back these podcasts, sometimes I don't even realize how tight I am in my face when I'm, when I'm concentrating.
You're thinking.
I'm like, why am I looking like
You
that?
mean consternating, because
Yeah.
you're consternating.
Yeah. And not to dismiss situations that are physiological, there is a such thing that is called somatization, right? Where our bodies manifest ailments because of our emotions. I have actually seen people have a skin condition that pops up because of their anxiety. You can't say that it's not real,
No.
right? They're having this physical reaction to their stress. They are not recognizing that they're having stress, especially with certain cultures. They don't recognize stress in that way, right? And so their body manifests it. Heartache, pains in their chest. That's a real thing. It's not just like Sanford and Son, I'm coming, whatever his wife's name was. It's a real thing. People feel they have chest pain and Elizabeth, yeah. I'm coming, Elizabeth. Right? However, just because somebody doesn't have a medically explained reason for why they're having these certain symptoms, chronic pain, whatever, doesn't mean that there is not something going on like an autoimmune condition or something that hasn't fully manifest what it is yet. And so I do get concerned with providers overly diagnosing that it is a somatoform disorder or something like that. It doesn't mean that what's going on isn't real, though, because everything starts in our brain. Everything does. So, and it's the same, the pain gates, depression, anxiety, it's all of the same stuff that's going on. So, no wonder why people who are depressed experience pain, and why people who are experiencing chronic pain experience depression and anxiety. All works together.
You mentioned the gut biome earlier, our little brain, right? And dietary changes can aid in lessening depression and anxiety. The environment can be affected in our gut biome such that we can feel better emotionally. I found that to be fascinating. I read that, I don't know, about a month ago in an article. I'm like, what? Very.
That you eat foods that make you literally happy.
It's about the health, though. It's like things that are missing. Like if, you add in seeds and, all of these things that are not present. We have these bacterium that are down there that are, they can eat all these things. And if you have a fat rich diet like I do, you've got a lot about fat critters down there eating your fat. If you have a sugar rich diet like I don't, you create a big colony of the sugar eating little critters down there. It's fascinating. And when you balance that out, you can feel better emotionally.
Yes, absolutely. Fermented foods, right? Our gut houses 100 million neurons. That's even more than what our spinal cord has. And so you have this gut microbiome, and there's, I don't know the number, like trillions of the bacteria that is in our digestive system. And it's directly linked to our brain, just like you were saying earlier, Miki. And so when your health is off, whether it's from stress or from diet or from an illness, it's going to send this distress signal, and it's going to increase anxiety, depression. We're going to have chronic disruption of our gut. Our microbiome's going to be off, have bloating, inflammation, all this stuff. Yeah. Eating
So-
probiotics might be helpful.
What about memory of things and like hearing sounds? This is what this is making me think of, which is probably a whole different topic, but you mentioned trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes me think, me thinking about old traumatic situations I've been in and hearing that sound again.
Yeah, there's definitely a connection to that. And our closest sensory to memory is our sense of smell. And it's even closest in our brain to that same area as our memories. So that's usually the number one trigger to trauma, post-trauma responses is usually smell, but it also can be certain sounds. It also can be certain things that we see. All of those things can trigger it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just thinking, how the body keeps those receipts and then it brings you right back into, revert you back to that old time.
Yeah.
How do you crawl out of that? It's difficult, I think,
It is. And there are different therapies that help with that. If you are by yourself, the best way, Heidi mentioned the grounding, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What do I see? What do I hear? What am I touching right now? How does this feel? What can I smell? What do I taste? So engaging your senses, being in the moment. Heidi also has mentioned before when she was talking about stress in one of our episodes about basically engaging our vagus nerve by dunking yourself in cold water. That's really helpful. It's twofold because of the cold is going to stimulate the vagus nerve. And also there's this diver reflex that we have that also slows down our nervous system. So putting your head or your whole body, dunking it in ice cold water. Be very careful with the temperature so that you don't get hypothermia. Humming, chanting, the woo sound, making that sound. Woo. Yes, woo. Yes, that it from your deep from your belly actually can stimulate your vagus nerve. There's some
And humming is soothing, and it's really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up because I'd forgotten about that. There's a whole little story in my mind somewhere. I won't be able to encapsulate it all right now, but it just harkened me back to the woman who took care of me when I was a little girl. Both my parents worked, which was unusual in the early 60s, but she hummed constantly. And it was so soothing and reassuring to me during a time in my life when my sister went off to school and I was home alone. And, she was lovely and reassuring in her own right. But when she hugged me and said, "Baby, it's going to be okay," she did it while rocking and humming. And I'm just thinking maybe that cradling that I was doing of myself was some distant memory of how to soothe.
It is. You took me right back to my childhood when I had experienced some adverse things. I went to the playground and I'd get on the swing. And so there's this natural rocking that's going, and I would sing to myself. And so I was self-soothing then as a child, that rocking movement, and I would just sing for hours on the swing, and I would pretend like I was flying. Yeah. Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
Thank you
Eating.
for this topic.
Yeah, you are so welcome. You mentioned what you eat. It's important, I think, when you're experiencing adverse events. A lot of times our go-to sometimes is to want to drink or to eat a lot of processed sugars, which is okay, if you're doing it intentionally. However, no, that can also increase the inflammation. And so trying to eat things like probiotics and fermented foods and nuts and whole foods, things like that, bananas, avocados, those are going to be things that are going to help in those moments if you can eat. And when you talked about stress in that episode, you talked about liquids. If you can't eat solid foods, eating liquids, drinking liquids, and challenging your thoughts. Oh my gosh, we didn't even get into that, but challenging your thoughts. Is this the thought? Is this a belief? Is this a fact? What evidence do I have that supports that? Right?
Listen to yourself, doing the body scans.
Mhm.
So helpful. You even said that. And I was like, oh, okay, let me
Yeah.
untense, and wow.
So our body does mind us, and our mind and body are connected. Right?
It's all in your head, but not really.
And we embody our mind.
That's right. Absolutely. And our body keeps the receipts.
There you
The
go.
very long receipts.
Yes.
So in short, eat avocados,
Mhm.
sing, and listen to all of our past episodes.
Absolutely.
Please do.
Like us and subscribe. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Lifing Coast to Coast. Join us every Saturday for insightful, relatable, and lively discussions that empower and inspire.